I don't know how you got this seat, but you need to move to economy right now before I call security." The flight attendant grabbed the woman's boarding pass right out of her hand and ripped it in half. Captain Monique Lawson sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her jaw tight but her expression calm. The flight attendant, a white woman in her 40s named Carol, turned to the other passengers with a satisfied smile, like she'd just stopped a crime in progress. What Carol didn't know was that Monique wasn't just a pilot. She was the check captain sent by corporate to evaluate this exact crew. A flight attendant refused to serve a black woman in first class and demanded she move to the back of the plane. Monique Lawson, 46, had been flying commercial aircraft for 22 years. She held every rating the FAA offered: commercial pilot, multi-engine, instrument, type-rated on 7 different aircraft. She was one of only 200 black female airline captains in the entire United States. And for the past 3 years, she'd served as Delta Airlines senior check captain for the Southeast region, meaning she evaluated other pilots, monitored crew performance, and reported directly to the VP of Flight Operations. Today she was flying from Atlanta to Dallas, but not in the cockpit. She was traveling as a passenger on Flight 1849, conducting what Delta called a silent audit. It was a routine evaluation. She'd observe how the crew interacted with passengers, handled service, managed conflicts, and followed protocol. She'd done it dozens of times. She dressed casually: jeans, a black blazer, her locks pulled into a low bun. She carried no pilot uniform, no badge, nothing that would identify her as crew. She wanted to see how passengers were treated when no one was watching. She boarded early, found her seat 1A first class aisle, and settled in. She pulled out her tablet and opened the observation checklist she'd used to score the crew. The lead flight attendant, Carol Henderson, stood near the galley reviewing paperwork. Monique watched her. Carol was in her mid-40s, blonde bob, crisp uniform, name tag polished. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this job for years. But confidence wasn't always competence. Monique had seen that before. Passengers began boarding. A white couple in their 60s took seats 1C and 1D. Carol greeted them warmly. "Good morning. Can I get you something to drink before we take off? Champagne, orange juice." The man smiled. "Champagne sounds great." "Coming right up." Carol returned with 2 glasses and a warm towel. Monique made a note on her tablet: lead FA, attentive service to passengers in 1C 1D. Then Carol turned to Monique. Her smile disappeared. "Excuse me," Carol said, her tone sharp. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Monique looked up. "Of course." She handed it over. Carol studied it, her eyes narrowing. "This says seat 1A." "That's correct," Monique said calmly. "How did you get a first-class seat?" Monique blinked. "I'm sorry." "I'm asking how you ended up in first class," Carol said, louder now. Other passengers were starting to look. Monique kept her voice even. "I booked it." Carol's lips pressed into a thin line. "Do you have a SkyMiles number?" "I do." "What is it?" Monique's jaw tightened. "I'm not required to give you that information. My boarding pass is valid. I'm in the correct seat." Carol crossed her arms. "I don't think you are." The cabin went quiet. Monique felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, the anger, the humiliation, the exhaustion of having to prove she belonged. But she kept her face neutral. "Is there a problem?" Monique asked. "Yes," Carol said. "I think you're in the wrong seat and I need you to move." "I'm not moving. This is my assigned seat." Carol's voice rose. "Ma'am, I don't know how you got this boarding pass, but first class is for paying customers and elite members only." "I'm aware of that," Monique said. "I'm a paying customer." "Then you won't mind if I verify that with the gate agent." Carol pulled out her phone and walked toward the galley. Monique sat frozen, her hands gripping the armrests. The couple in 1C and 1D looked away, uncomfortable. A businessman across the aisle stared at his laptop, pretending not to notice. No one said a word. Monique pulled out her own phone and opened the Delta Crew app. She typed a message to her supervisor, Kevin Grant, VP of Flight Operations. Silent Audit on Flight 1849. Lead FA just accused me of being in the wrong seat and questioned how I got a first-class ticket, attempting to remove me, documenting everything. Kevin's response came within seconds. Are you serious? Dead serious? Do not identify yourself yet. Let this play out. I want to see how far she takes it. Monique took a slow breath and put her phone away. Carol returned, another flight attendant trailing behind her, a younger white woman, maybe 25, name tag reading Stephanie. Ma'am, Carol said, her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, I've confirmed with the gate that there's been an error. You're supposed to be in seat 24B. You need to gather your things and move. Now. Monique didn't move. There's no error. I booked this seat 3 weeks ago. I have my confirmation email, my receipt, and my boarding pass. I don't care what you think you have, Carol snapped. You're in the wrong seat, and if you don't move, I will call security to remove you from this aircraft. The silence was deafening. Monique looked Carol directly in the eye. Call them, she said quietly. Carol's face flushed red. Fine. She turned to Stephanie. Get the gate agent. Tell them we have an uncooperative passenger refusing to follow crew instructions. Stephanie hesitated, her eyes flicking to Monique. Carol, maybe we should just. Now, Stephanie. Stephanie hurried off the plane. Monique sat perfectly still, her heart pounding but her face calm. Carol stood in the aisle, arms crossed, glaring at her. You know, Carol said, her voice dripping with condescension, this kind of behavior is exactly why people like you get a bad reputation. Monique's hands curled into fists in her lap. But she didn't respond. She just stared straight ahead. But this was only the beginning. 2 minutes later, a gate agent, a young black man named Marcus, boarded the plane. He walked straight to Monique. Ma'am, I'm Marcus, the gate agent. There seems to be some confusion about your seat assignment. Can I see your boarding pass? Monique handed it to him. Marcus scanned it with his handheld device. His face changed immediately. He looked at the screen, then at Monique, then back at the screen. His eyes widened. Ma'am, he said carefully, your boarding pass is valid. You are absolutely in the correct seat. Carol stepped forward. That's impossible. I checked the manifest. You checked wrong, Marcus said, his voice tight. This passenger is a Delta Medallion member. She's booked and paid for seat 1A. There is no error. Carol's mouth opened and closed. But. There is no but, Marcus said firmly. He turned to Monique. I apologize for the confusion, ma'am. You're welcome to stay in your seat. Is there anything I can get for you? I'm fine, Monique said quietly. Thank you. Marcus nodded and turned to Carol. Can I speak to you outside? Carol's face was bright red. I was just trying to. Outside now. They stepped into the jet bridge. Monique could hear muffled voices. Marcus's calm but firm, Carol's defensive and shrill. When they returned, Carol's expression was stone. She didn't look at Monique. She didn't apologize. She just turned and walked to the galley. Stephanie approached Monique hesitantly. Ma'am, I'm so sorry about that. Can I get you something to drink? Water, juice? Monique met her eyes. Stephanie looked genuinely uncomfortable. Water, please, Monique said. Stephanie nodded and hurried away. The couple in 1C and 1D still hadn't said a word. Monique pulled out her tablet and typed. Lead FA Carol Henderson, racially profiled passenger in first class, Accused passenger of being in wrong seat despite valid boarding pass. Attempted removal. Refused to apologize after being corrected by gate agent. She saved the note. The plane pushed back from the gate. The captain's voice came over the PA, calm, professional male. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Reynolds. We're third in line for takeoff, so we should be wheels up in about 10 minutes. Flight time to Dallas is approximately 2 hours. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you there in no time." Monique closed her eyes. She'd flown with Captain Reynolds before. Good pilot, decent guy. He had no idea what had just happened in his cabin. What she didn't know was who else had been watching. The flight took off smoothly. Once they reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign turned off, and Carol began the first-class service. She moved down the aisle with a tray of drinks. She stopped at 1C and 1D. "Here's your champagne, and I have warm nuts coming shortly." The couple smiled. Carol moved to the row across the aisle. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you?" Then she reached Monique's row. She looked right past her. Didn't ask if she wanted a drink. Didn't offer a snack. Just moved on to the next row. Monique stared at her, stunned. Stephanie, working behind Carol, noticed. She stopped at Monique's seat. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. What would you like to drink?" "Coffee, please, black." "Of course, I'll be right back." Stephanie returned a minute later with a full cup of coffee and a small plate of cookies. "Again, I'm really sorry," she whispered. Monique gave her a small smile. "Thank you, Stephanie, I appreciate you." Stephanie nodded and moved on. Carol, meanwhile, was in the galley, talking to another flight attendant, a white man named Brian. Monique couldn't hear the full conversation, but she caught pieces. "Don't know how she got that seat. Probably used points or something. People like that always find a way to game the system." Monique's stomach turned. She pulled out her phone and opened the voice recorder app. She set the phone on the armrest, screen down, and let it record. 10 minutes later, Carol's voice drifted back again, louder this time. "I'm telling you, she doesn't belong in first class. I've been doing this job for 18 years, and I can tell when someone doesn't fit." Brian laughed. "What are you gonna do, kick her out mid-flight?" "I wish," Carol muttered. Monique's jaw clenched. She stopped the recording and saved it. Then she opened her messages and sent the audio file to Kevin Grant with a single line. "You need to hear this." If only Carol knew who she was talking about. An hour into the flight, a call button chimed. Row 5. Stephanie walked over. A passenger, a white woman in her 30s, held up an empty cup. "Can I get some more water?" "Of course." Stephanie returned with a bottle of water. "Thank you so much," the woman said. Then quieter, "Hey, can I ask you something?" Stephanie leaned in. "Sure." "What happened earlier with that woman in 1A? I saw the whole thing and it was awful." Stephanie glanced toward the galley. "I can't really talk about it." "I recorded it," the woman said. Stephanie's eyes widened. "You what?" The woman pulled out her phone. "I was filming my daughter in the window seat and I caught the whole thing. That flight attendant was completely out of line." "Ma'am, I really can't." "I'm going to post it," the woman said. "People need to see this." Stephanie didn't respond. She just walked back to the galley. Monique, who'd overheard the entire exchange, felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't wanted this to go public. She'd wanted to handle it internally, professionally, quietly. But it was too late now. And just when things seemed like they couldn't get worse, the intercom crackled. "Flight attendants, please report to the cockpit immediately." Carol's face went pale. She and Brian exchanged a glance. Stephanie looked confused. Carol picked up the intercom phone in the galley. Monique couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Carol's expression shift from confusion to fear. Carol hung up and walked briskly to the cockpit. She was inside for less than 2 minutes. When she emerged, her face was white as a sheet. She walked straight to Monique's seat. "Ma'am," she said, her voice shaking, "I need to speak with you." Monique looked up. "Yes." Carol glanced around, then leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "I've just been informed by the captain that you're a Delta pilot." Monique didn't respond. Carol's hands were trembling. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Monique said calmly. I made a mistake." "You made several." Carol's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I'm sorry. I was just trying to do my job." Monique set down her coffee and looked Carol directly in the eye. "Your job," she said quietly, "is to serve passengers with respect, not to decide who belongs and who doesn't based on the color of their skin." Carol opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "I am Captain Monique Lawson," Monique continued, her voice steady. "I've been flying for Delta for 22 years. I'm a senior check captain, and I was on this flight to evaluate crew performance." Carol's knees buckled slightly. She grabbed the seat back to steady herself. "You accused me of stealing a seat," Monique said. "You tried to have me removed. You ignored me during service. And you stood in that galley and said I don't belong in first class." "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." The cabin had gone silent again. Passengers were staring. "When we land," Monique said, "you will report to the chief flight attendant's office. You will submit a written account of everything that happened on this flight, and you will face a formal review." Carol's tears spilled over. "Please. I'll lose my job." "You should have thought of that before you humiliated me in front of 180 people." Carol backed away, sobbing, and retreated to the galley. Monique turned back to her tablet, her hands shaking. But here's the part that changed everything. 30 minutes before landing, Monique's phone buzzed. A text from Kevin Grant. "Monique, I just got a call from our PR team. A passenger posted video of the incident on Twitter. It's going viral. Over 500,000 views in the last hour. Media outlets are picking it up." Monique's heart sank. She opened Twitter. The video was everywhere. The caption read, "At Delta flight attendant accuses black woman of stealing a first-class seat and tries to kick her off the plane. Turns out she's a pilot. This is disgusting." The video showed everything. Carol demanding to see her boarding pass, accusing her of being in the wrong seat, threatening to call security. The comments were brutal. "This is racism, plain and simple. Fire her. I'm never flying Delta again. That woman handled it with so much grace, I would have lost it." Monique closed the app and stared out the window. This wasn't what she wanted. She didn't want to be a headline. She just wanted to do her job. But the world had other plans. What Monique didn't know was that Carol's history was about to be exposed. When the plane landed in Dallas, Monique was the last to deplane. Carol stood near the exit, her eyes red, her face swollen. She didn't say goodbye to passengers. She didn't make eye contact with anyone. Monique walked past her without a word. In the jet bridge, 2 Delta supervisors were waiting, both women, one white, one black. The black woman stepped forward. "Captain Lawson, I'm Renee Parker, station manager here in Dallas. Can we have a word?" Monique nodded. They led her to a private office near the gate. "First," Renee said, "I want to apologize on behalf of Delta. What happened to you today is unacceptable." "Thank you," Monique said. "Second," Renee continued, "we've launched an immediate investigation. Carol Henderson has been placed on administrative leave, effective immediately." Monique nodded. "Good." The white supervisor, a woman named Lisa, leaned forward. "Captain, there's something you should know. After your report came in, we pulled Carol's personnel file. She's had complaints before. Monique's eyes narrowed. What kind of complaints? 3 formal complaints in the last 2 years, Lisa said. All from passengers of color, all claiming she was rude, dismissive, or discriminatory. Monique's stomach dropped, and she's still flying. Renee's jaw tightened. She went through retraining after each complaint, but clearly it didn't work. Retraining, Monique repeated, her voice hard. So you knew she had a pattern and you did nothing. We followed protocol, Lisa began. Your protocol failed, Monique said, and now it's national news. Renee nodded. You're right, and we're going to fix it. How? We're recommending termination, Renee said, and we're implementing a new system for tracking and addressing discriminatory behavior. No more second chances. No more retraining. One verified incident and you're done. Monique sat back. I'll believe it when I see it. Well, make sure you do, Renee said. And just when Monique thought it was over, her phone rang. The caller ID read, Edward Harmon, CEO, Delta Airlines. Monique's breath caught. She answered, This is Captain Lawson. Monique, this is Ed Harmon. I just watched the video, and I'm horrified. Monique closed her eyes. Mr. Harmon. Let me finish, he said. You are one of the finest pilots in this company. You've given 22 years of exemplary service, and you were treated like a criminal on one of our own aircraft. That is unacceptable. I appreciate that, sir. I want you to know, Carol Henderson is done. She will be terminated within the hour, and I'm personally overseeing a top-to-bottom review of our crew conduct policies. Monique nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Thank you. There's more, Ed said. I'd like you to lead that review. I want you to help us rebuild our training programs, our complaint processes, everything. I want to make sure this never happens again. Monique was silent for a moment. You're asking me to fix the system that failed me. I'm asking you to make sure it doesn't fail anyone else. Monique took a breath. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them. I want full authority to redesign the training curriculum. I want mandatory bias training for every flight attendant, every gate agent, every crew member. I want an independent review board for complaints, and I want accountability, real accountability. Done, Ed said without hesitation. Anything else? I want a public apology, not to me, to every passenger of color who's ever been profiled, dismissed, or humiliated on one of our flights. There was a pause, then Ed said, You'll have it. But here's what Monique didn't expect. What came next changed everything. 2 days later, Delta Airlines released a statement. It was posted on every social media platform, sent to every major news outlet, and displayed on the homepage of their website. Statement from Edward Harmon, CEO, Delta Airlines. This week, one of our most respected pilots, Captain Monique Lawson, was racially profiled and humiliated by a member of our crew. This is unacceptable. It goes against everything Delta stands for. We have terminated the employee involved, but that is not enough. We are committed to doing better. We are implementing immediate changes, including mandatory bias training, an independent complaint review board, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. Captain Lawson has agreed to lead this effort, and we are grateful for her leadership and grace. To every passenger who has experienced discrimination on our flights, we are sorry. We will do better. We must do better. The response was immediate. News outlets covered the story for days. Social media exploded with support for Monique. Passengers shared their own stories of discrimination. And Delta's stock took a temporary hit, but the company didn't back down. They followed through. Every promise, every commitment. 6 months later, the resolution. Monique stood in front of a conference room filled with 300 flight attendants, gate agents, and crew supervisors. She wore her captain's uniform, 4 stripes on her shoulders, wings on her chest. "My name is Captain Monique Lawson," she began, "and 6 months ago I was told I didn't belong in first class." The room was silent. I was accused of stealing a seat. I was threatened with removal. I was humiliated in front of a full cabin. Why? Because a flight attendant looked at me and decided I didn't fit her idea of who belongs in first class. Monique paused. "But here's the truth. I didn't just belong in that seat. I belonged in the cockpit. I've spent 22 years earning my place in this industry, and no one gets to take that from me." Scattered applause began, then grew into a standing ovation. Monique waited for it to quiet. "I'm not here to shame anyone," she continued. "I'm here to make sure this never happens again. We've built a new system, a fair system, a system that protects passengers and holds us accountable." She looked around the room. "Some of you will embrace this, some of you won't, but I'm telling you right now, if you can't treat every passenger with dignity and respect, you don't belong here." More applause. When the session ended, a young black flight attendant approached Monique. "Captain Lawson," she said, "I just wanted to say thank you. I've been flying for 3 years and I've experienced what you experienced more times than I can count. Knowing that you stood up, that you didn't back down, it means everything." Monique's eyes filled with tears. "You belong here," Monique said. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." The young woman nodded, tears streaming down her own face. Epilogue. Carol Henderson never worked in the airline industry again. The video of the incident has been viewed over 20 million times and is now used in corporate diversity training programs across the country. Monique Lawson was promoted to chief pilot of Delta's Southeast region, one of the highest-ranking positions in the company. And the young woman who recorded the video, she became a vocal advocate for racial justice, using her platform to hold corporations accountable. But the most important change: passengers of color began to fly with a little more confidence, knowing that their dignity mattered. Monique's victory wasn't just about one flight attendant losing her job. It was proof that when you refuse to shrink, when you stand firm in your worth, you don't just change your own life. You change the system. When they tell you that you don't belong, let your presence be the answer. When they try to humiliate you, let your dignity silence them. And when they assume you're powerless, let your credentials and your courage speak. Because sometimes, the person they underestimate is the one flying the plane. Be honest, would you have stayed as calm as Captain Lawson? Or would you have demanded justice right there in the aisle? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe that respect should never depend on a uniform or a title, hit that like button and share this story. I'm Ctales, and I'll see you in the next one.